What if I told you there are places on Earth that shouldn't exist, ruins too advanced for their time, artifacts no one can explain, and cities that whisper secrets from a forgotten age? What if everything we thought we knew about history was just the surface of something much deeper? Welcome to Unearthed Secrets, where we journey through the most astonishing archaeological finds that remain unexplained. Before we begin, hit subscribe, drop a like, and tell me in the comments, where are you watching from, and what time is it there? The forgotten skeleton with a golden tongue. There's something deeply unsettling about finding a person who was buried with care, but with a golden tongue. It feels both reverent and eerie, as if someone wanted to make sure their voice would carry far beyond death. The story begins in early 2021, when a joint team of Egyptian and Dominican archaeologists set out to explore a cluster of tombs near the ancient city of Taposiris Magna, just west of Alexandria. This wasn't the kind of dig that makes headlines. These were not grand pyramids or towering statues, just quiet burial chambers, weathered by centuries of wind and sand. Most of the tombs they uncovered were modest, the kind of final resting places you'd expect for ordinary people. Faded carvings, a few scattered amulets, and pottery fragments that once held offerings for the afterlife. Nothing unusual, nothing that would make you pause. But then, one day, they opened a tomb that would change everything. Inside lay the skeletal remains of a man. The bones were delicate and dry, a reminder of how fragile the human body becomes after centuries. And yet, there was something strange, something almost shining. When they brushed away the layers of sand, they saw it. Resting where the man's tongue should have been was a thin, glimmering plate of gold, perfectly shaped like a human tongue. It wasn't a coin, it wasn't jewelry, it was something intentional, deliberate, placed with care in the mouth of the dead. The archaeologists stopped in silence, each one quietly processing what they were seeing. Who would place a tongue of gold inside a person's mouth, and why? At first, they thought it was a one-time ritual, maybe unique to this individual. But as they continued to excavate more tombs nearby, the pattern repeated. In tomb after tomb, golden tongues appeared, each one crafted with remarkable precision. This wasn't a mistake, this wasn't a random act, this was ritual. Historians believe the answer lies in the beliefs of ancient Egypt. The afterlife was seen as a vast and treacherous journey. The soul had to stand before divine judges, to speak its truth, to declare itself pure. What if the golden tongue was meant to give the deceased the ability to speak clearly before the gods, to ensure that even in death, their voice would never falter? Some experts even suggest that silence in the afterlife was seen as a kind of curse. To be unable to speak meant to be forgotten, to be lost. A golden tongue might have been a kind of divine insurance, an eternal voice forged from something precious. But the mystery deepens when you realize who these people were. They weren't pharaohs or royal elites. Their tombs were simple, sometimes even unfinished. Their bones showed signs of labor, of hard work. These were ordinary men and women, not kings. And yet, someone cared enough to give them this strange and costly gift. Were these people oracles, messengers between the worlds of the living and the dead? Or was the golden tongue meant to protect them from something, perhaps even silence itself? The truth is, we don't know. The ancient texts that might have explained these rituals are missing or lost. All we have is the golden tongues themselves, mute, gleaming, and stubbornly mysterious. Imagine standing in that chamber late at night. The air is cool and still. The gold catches the faint light of your lantern, as if it's trying to speak in some language older than words. You'd feel it, the quiet weight of a story that no one alive today can fully understand. A city that burns beneath the earth and never sleeps. There is a place where the earth is alive with fire, real fire. Not the kind you can douse with water, not the kind that flickers and fades, but a fire that has been burning for centuries, maybe longer. Imagine standing on ground that is warm beneath your feet, the air carrying a faint hiss, as if the earth itself is breathing smoke. In the heart of southern Turkey lies a site the locals call Yanartash, meaning flaming rock. At first glance it might look like a trick of nature, gases escaping through cracks in the earth, igniting into tiny flames. But the more archaeologists studied this place, the less ordinary it seemed. Back in the 1940s, when researchers first began mapping the ruins that lay scattered across the hillside, they discovered something startling. This wasn't just a wild landscape, dotted with natural fire. It was a settlement, a city, long abandoned, that had been built deliberately above this eternal flame. Why would anyone choose to live on burning ground? Layers of ruins suggest that not one but several civilizations settled here over thousands of years. First the Phrygians, then the Greeks, and later the Romans, all building over the same scorched earth, each leaving behind blackened walls, soot-stained pottery, and fragments of daily life. It was as if the fire itself was a reason to stay, not a danger to avoid. Ancient Greek texts spoke of Mount Chimera, a place where fire leapt from the stones and could not be extinguished. Sailors used its glow as a beacon when navigating dark coastlines. Some believed it was sacred, a place where gods had touched the earth. But beneath the myth, there is something practical and eerie. Archaeologists found signs that the flames were intentionally channeled, stone-lined pits, primitive ventilation shafts, and trenches cut into the earth, as though someone had learned to control the fire rather than fear it. The source, geologists say, is methane seeping from underground. As soon as it hits the air, it bursts into flame. But that doesn't explain why this fire has burned for so long, why it hasn't shifted or gone out, or why no other site like it has been settled with such persistence. One discovery made the mystery even stranger: a shaft lined with stone, deep and narrow, containing charred human bones. The placement of the remains was careful, deliberate. These weren't victims of an accident, they were placed there, perhaps as offerings. Could it be that the people here worshipped the fire? Did they see it as a divine presence, something to be fed with gifts and sacrifices? In 2019, thermal imaging revealed something even more chilling. Beneath the hottest spot of the flames, deep underground, there appears to be a sealed chamber. No entrance, no tunnels leading in. Just a hollow space, hidden under layers of stone and fire. Some archaeologists believe it's a tomb. Others think it's a ritual chamber, sealed forever to protect or contain whatever lies inside. No one dares to dig into it. The ground is unstable, and one wrong move could trigger a deadly explosion. For now the secret remains buried, guarded by the eternal flames. Standing at Yanatash at night, you can hear the soft crackle of fire. The air smells faintly metallic, and the ground radiates heat like an ember that never cools. It feels ancient, older than history, older than language itself. Maybe the fire isn't just a natural accident. Maybe it's a story still burning, waiting for someone to listen. The stone that beats like the heart of the world, high in the quiet folds of the Ural Mountains, where the trees grow dense and the wind seems to move in whispers, there is a stone unlike any other. At first glance, it is unremarkable. A grey slab, worn smooth by centuries of rain and snow. Travelers often walk past it, without a second thought. But if you stand very still, if you place your hand gently against its cool surface, some say you can feel it, a faint rhythm, slow and steady, like the heartbeat of the earth itself. This strange discovery was first recorded in the 1970s. A team of Soviet geologists had been sent to the region to monitor seismic activity. It was supposed to be a routine expedition, taking soil samples, checking for underground shifts, nothing unusual. But when they set up their instruments near the stone, they detected something they had never seen before. A pulse, one soft beat every 26 seconds. At first, they assumed the equipment was malfunctioning. They tested it again and again, moving the sensors to different locations. The pulse vanished when they moved away, but as soon as they returned to that same stone, it returned precise, steady, unchanging. The geologists tried everything to understand it. They drilled small holes into the ground nearby, scanned for underground water movement, even checked for electrical interference. But the stone was nothing special, at least on the surface, just a slab of basalt, no metals or crystals. Nothing that could explain such a perfect rhythm, and yet, the pulse continued. Local villagers had long whispered stories about a living stone, hidden in the forest. Some said it was sacred, that if you slept near it, your dreams would come alive. Others claimed that animals avoided it, as if they sensed something unnatural. To the scientists, these stories sounded like folklore, until they spent a night beside it. One of the geologists reported that while he tried to sleep, he felt the ground beneath him thumping faintly, as though something deep inside the earth was breathing. It was enough to leave even the most skeptical among them unsettled. Years later, new teams visited the site with advanced equipment. They found that the pulse had not stopped. It was still beating every 26 seconds, unwavering, like a clock that never winds down. Even stranger, the strength of the pulse seemed to change slightly during the phases of the moon. During a full moon, the beat was stronger, heavier, as if the stone itself was alive and awake. What could cause such a phenomenon? No one knows for certain. Some scientists suggest that it might be related to deep-sea waves traveling through the Earth's crust, while others argue that no known process could explain the consistency of the pulse at this one location. Then came the satellite data. Orbiting instruments recorded faint signals, 26-second pulses, coming from beneath the surface of the Earth, deep and far-reaching, echoing across continents. Could this stone in the Urals be part of something larger? A single point in a network of natural heartbeats spread across the planet? Ancient myths seem to suggest so. In Celtic traditions, certain stones were believed to hold the memory of the Earth. In Hindu lore, sacred stones were said to breathe with the energy of creation. Even some Native American legends speak of places where the ground itself keeps time, recording the lives that pass above it. The stone in the Urals remains a mystery. No one has broken it open. No one has tried to dig too deeply around it, perhaps out of fear that whatever it's connected to should not be disturbed. It stands there, silent yet alive, beating softly in the forest shadows. If you were to find yourself alone there, just as the sun sets, and place your hand on that stone, perhaps you would feel it too. That slow, steady rhythm, not yours, not the wind, but something much older, a heartbeat as old as the world itself. Skulls that tell stories we don't understand. In dimly lit museum storerooms, far from the public eye, there are cabinets that hold objects most people never get to see. Inside them lie skulls, human skulls, that look familiar at first glance, but the longer you stare, the stranger they appear. Their shapes are wrong. Too long, too curved, too alien. These are the elongated skulls, found in archaeological sites all over the world, and no one truly agrees on what they mean. The most famous examples come from Paracas, Peru, where more than 300 elongated skulls were uncovered in a vast desert necropolis. These skulls are so stretched and distorted that at first explorers believed they belonged to a different species altogether. The skulls are not simply larger, they are shaped in ways that seem unnatural, with sloping foreheads and elongated craniums that give them an almost otherworldly appearance. The usual explanation offered by anthropologists is cranial binding, a practice where the skulls of infants were intentionally shaped using cloth and wooden boards. This practice is known in several ancient cultures, from the Maya in Central America to certain tribes in Africa and Asia. It was often a mark of status or beauty, a way to distinguish the elite from the common people. But even this answer does not satisfy everyone. Some of the Paracas skulls, for example, are far heavier and have thicker bone structure than normal human skulls, with strange anatomical differences, like larger eye sockets and unusual jaw shapes. These features don't appear in skulls that have simply been flattened or wrapped. Some researchers argue that while many elongated skulls are the result of cultural practices, there are a few that might not be explained so easily. And it's not just Peru. Elongated skulls have been found in Malta, Egypt, Russia, and even in parts of Europe. The Lady of Saqqara, a mummy found in Egypt, was reported to have an elongated skull that some believe was natural, not shaped after birth. In Malta, near ancient temple sites, skulls with similar traits have been discovered, some with evidence of trepanation or surgical holes, as if they were being experimented on. The mystery deepens when you consider the myths that surround these regions. Many ancient stories speak of giants, gods or sky people who were different from humans, taller, with larger heads, wiser, and somehow connected to the heavens. Were these skulls simply a way for ancient people to imitate their gods, reshaping their children to resemble them? Or do they represent something more? Skeptics dismiss these ideas, insisting that all elongated skulls are man-made. But even among mainstream researchers, questions remain about why so many distant cultures, who never met or exchanged ideas, adopted the same strange custom. How did the Maya, the Egyptians and the tribes of the Russian steppes all decide that a long sloping skull was a mark of power or divinity? Some fringe researchers believe these skulls were not just about appearance. They argue that altering the shape of the skull could affect the brain itself, perhaps heightening spiritual experiences or inducing altered states of consciousness. Could it be that these ancient cultures believed a differently shaped head would connect them to the gods? In the quiet halls of museums, these skulls sit under glass, staring back with hollow eye sockets. They are silent, but they hold secrets about people who lived and died thousands of years ago, people who saw the world so differently that they reshaped their own bodies to match that vision. If you were to hold one of these skulls in your hands, you might feel a shiver, not because it is strange, but because it reminds you that human history is not as simple or as uniform as we like to believe. There have always been mysteries hidden in our bones. The lost temples, buried in soundless deserts. There are deserts on this planet so vast, so quiet, that standing in the middle of them feels like being on another world. The wind moves like a whisper. carrying grains of sand that have drifted for centuries, covering and uncovering secrets that should have been lost forever. It's in these soundless deserts that explorers have stumbled upon something almost unbelievable, temples buried so deep and so perfectly hidden that even local legends forgot they existed. One such place lies beneath the Ribble al-Khali, the empty quarter of Arabia. This is not just any desert, it is one of the largest sand seas on Earth, a place where the dunes rise like frozen waves, shifting and swallowing anything left unguarded. For centuries, stories persisted of a lost city beneath these sands, a place called Iram of the Pillars, a city so wealthy and beautiful, it was said to be cursed by the gods and buried under an ocean of sand. When archaeologists finally began scanning the region with ground-penetrating radar and satellite imagery, they found something astonishing. Beneath the dunes were structures, massive rectangular foundations, carved stone blocks, and what appeared to be the remains of tall columns, exactly like those described in ancient texts. But what stunned researchers was not just the size of these ruins, it was their silence. There were no records of who built them, no inscriptions, no artifacts beyond the weathered stones. It was as if the builders had erased themselves from history. Similar mysteries exist in other deserts. In Egypt's western desert, archaeologists have discovered the ruins of what seem to be ancient temples older than the pyramids themselves. Some are only partially unearthed, their tops barely poking through the sand, others are buried so deep that only radar can detect their outlines. What's strange is how different these temples look, compared to the known structures of the Nile Valley, different building techniques, different alignments, almost as if they belonged to a forgotten civilization that predated Egypt's dynasties. And then there is the Taklamakan Desert in China, a place so inhospitable that locals call it the Sea of Death. In its shifting sands, explorers have found traces of ancient Buddhist temples and cities, perfectly preserved yet frozen in time, their walls still standing after 1,000 years. When the wind dies down and the desert becomes utterly still, walking through these ruins feels like stepping into a moment that refuses to fade. What is it about deserts that makes them the keepers of such mysteries? Some believe it's the sand itself, acting like a natural vault, covering and protecting what time should have erased. Others suggest that these temples were meant to be hidden, built in remote, silent places for rituals that required complete isolation from the world. Standing at the edge of one of these buried temples, you might feel something strange, a weight, a presence, as if the stones beneath the sand are waiting to be heard again. The wind will pass over them, carrying nothing but whispers, and you realize that the desert is not empty at all. It is full of memories, of stories, of places that once mattered deeply to someone long ago. Maybe, if you listen carefully enough, you can still hear the echoes of chanting carried by the wind, a soundless memory buried under an endless sea of sand. The staircase that leads nowhere, but whispers back. In the heart of certain forgotten ruins, there are structures that defy logic, walls that seem to serve no purpose, doorways that open into nothing. And then, there is the staircase, an ancient set of steps, carved from stone, leading upward or downward into emptiness. These staircases stand alone, broken off, incomplete. Yet, for reasons no one can quite explain, they feel intentional, as if they were built not to be used by us, but by something or someone else. One of the most unsettling examples was found in the dense jungles of Cambodia, not far from the ruins of Angkor. Hidden beneath layers of moss and centuries of decay, a stone staircase was uncovered, perfectly carved, with steps that rose at a steep angle, yet it ended abruptly in mid-air. There was no landing, no upper floor, no structure to connect it to, just a set of steps leading into nothing, like a frozen thought. When archaeologists examined the site, they discovered something even stranger. The stones themselves were acoustically responsive. When one walked up or down the steps and spoke softly, the sound would carry in an unusual way, bouncing back not as an echo, but as a faint murmur, almost as if the staircase itself was whispering in return. Some dismissed this as a quirk of architecture, a trick of sound, but local legends painted a darker picture. Elders in nearby villages spoke of the ladder to the spirits, a place where the living could call out to those beyond. According to these stories, the stairs were not meant to take you somewhere, but to speak to something invisible. Climbers would stand on the highest step and whisper questions, and if they waited long enough, they would hear an answer, not in their own voice, but in a strange, quiet tone that came from the stones. Similar staircases have been reported in other parts of the world. In India's abandoned temples, lone stairways climb skyward, ending just below the open sky, almost like a tribute to the heavens. In Peru, deep in old ceremonial sites, staircases descend into the earth, vanishing into dead ends of solid rock, as if they once led to hidden chambers that no longer exist. What makes these staircases so eerie is their feeling of purpose. Standing before one, you can sense that it was not built by accident. The steps are worn, as if people climbed them for centuries. Yet, now they lead nowhere. They end in silence. And that silence feels heavy, too heavy. Some researchers have speculated that these staircases were designed to enhance sound, acting as resonant instruments for rituals or prayers. Others wonder if they were symbolic, representing the passage between worlds, climbing toward the gods above or descending toward the spirits below. But there are also the stories, whispered by those who have stood alone on such stairs at dusk. They claim that when the wind is still, and you speak softly, the stones seem to respond, not with a clear echo, but with something else. A voice that doesn't sound like your own. What would you ask, if you were there? Would you risk hearing what might whisper back? Messages found in clay that no one can read. If you were to walk through the archives of the world's great museums, past the glittering displays of gold and jewelry, you would eventually find something far humbler. Rows of clay tablets, sealed jars and small, weathered fragments covered with strange markings. They may not look like much at first glance, but these pieces of clay hold some of the oldest messages ever written by human hands. And the most unsettling part, we cannot read them. The Indus Valley civilization, which flourished more than 4,000 years ago, is one of the greatest riddles of the ancient world. Excavations in the cities of Harappa and Mohenjo-Daro have uncovered more than 4,000 inscribed clay seals. Each seal is marked with a combination of mysterious symbols, tiny pictographs of animals, geometric shapes and signs that appear to represent words, but no one knows what they say. Unlike the Egyptian hieroglyphs, which were unlocked by the Rosetta Stone, the Indus script has no bilingual key to guide us. Researchers have tried everything, comparing the symbols to early Dravidian languages, looking for patterns, and even using artificial intelligence to guess their meaning. But the results are inconclusive. Some scholars believe these marks are not a true language at all, but rather a series of ritual or trade symbols. Others argue that the inscriptions are too structured to be random, suggesting they could contain entire histories or prayers lost to time. What makes this mystery so haunting is that the Indus people were not primitive scribblers. Their cities were astonishingly advanced for their time, complete with straight roads, multi-story homes, and intricate drainage systems that rival those of modern towns. Yet, despite their achievements, we can't read a single sentence they left behind. It's like staring at the ghost of a civilization, with its voice muted by the centuries. And the Indus Valley is not the only keeper of unreadable messages. Across the globe, other clay and stone artifacts whisper secrets that no one can fully understand. The Phaistos disc of Crete, for instance, is a baked clay disc stamped with spiraling symbols that have puzzled linguists for over 100 years. Found in 1908, the disc is believed to date back to around 1700 BCE, yet no one knows if its symbols are letters, a song, or perhaps a list of sacred rites. In Easter Island, far from any mainland, there exists a set of wooden tablets engraved with the mysterious Rongorongo script. While not made of clay, these carvings share the same fate, undeciphered, unread, and nearly lost after the island's culture was devastated in the 19th century. Even when attempts are made to translate the patterns, they seem to slip away like shadows, offering no clear meaning. Why are these messages so difficult to understand? Some historians believe it is because these cultures never intended for their words to be read by outsiders. The clay seals of the Indus Valley might have been meant for merchants or priests alone, their meaning obvious to those within their world but incomprehensible to anyone else. Others suggest that these writings might hold entirely different systems of thought, ways of expressing ideas that don't align with how we think about language today. But there's something deeply emotional about holding one of these fragments. Imagine the hand that carved it thousands of years ago, pressing into wet clay with a sharpened tool, recording something they believed would matter for generations. Maybe it was a prayer, maybe it was a contract, a love letter, or a warning. Now that voice is silent. All that's left is a sequence of marks on clay, its meaning washed away by time. Some scientists argue that solving these puzzles might change everything we know about the ancient world. What if the Indus Valley tablets hold their history, their laws, or their map of the stars? What if the Phaistos disc tells of a kingdom we've never heard of? We may never know. And yet maybe the mystery is part of the message. These silent clay tablets remind us how fragile memory really is. A civilization can build cities, trade across oceans, and thrive for centuries, but if their words vanish, so does their story. When you look at these unreadable symbols, you might feel something quiet yet powerful, as if the past is leaning close, trying to whisper something through time. But all we can do is listen and wonder. The garden where nothing ever dies. There is a garden hidden deep within a forgotten valley, where time itself feels hesitant, as though the clock refuses to tick in its presence. The locals speak of it with a mix of awe and unease, lowering their voices as if the mere mention of it might draw its attention. They call it both a miracle and a curse. In this strange place, life does not end. The leaves never fade to brown. The flowers never curl or fall. Every blade of grass, every petal, every vine remains as vivid as though it had just been born from the soil that morning. The entrance is unmarked and nearly impossible to find. A thin trail, often overgrown and half hidden by thickets of wild bushes, leads to a narrow archway of weather-worn stone. To those who walk by, it looks like nothing more than a natural break between rocks. Yet the few who have found the path and stepped inside say the world changes the instant you cross that invisible line. The air grows heavy and warm, as though the valley is holding its breath, waiting. Colors sharpen, the reds are deeper, the greens almost glowing, the blues of distant blossoms so intense they seem unreal. Even the shadows behave strangely here, soft but unusually defined, like brushstrokes on a canvas that refuse to fade with time. What disturbs visitors most is not the beauty of the garden, but its stillness. It is not the stillness of peace, but of something unnatural, of a world that refuses to change. A branch that falls from a tree remains supple and green, showing no signs of decay. Weeks later, leaves torn from their stems stay alive, veins and edges glowing with color as though they have no concept of death. Even water refuses to behave normally here. Droplets remain on petals and leaves for days, never drying, as if time and evaporation have been stripped from this place. There are ruins scattered near the outer edges of the garden, crumbling walls, half-buried stones, the outline of what may have once been a grand gate. No carvings remain to tell their story, no one knows who built them or why. Some scholars speculate that the garden may have once been part of an ancient temple, a sacred ground dedicated to forgotten gods who could grant life everlasting. Others, whispering in tones of caution, believe the garden is not divine but a remnant of something far older and darker, an experiment left behind by those who should never have tampered with life and death. What truly unsettles the villagers are the stories of those who tried to take something from the garden. A merchant once attempted to bring home a single perfect rose. By the time he reached the edge of the valley, the petals had blackened, crumbled, and turned to ash in his hands. Another traveler scooped soil into a small jar, hoping to grow something as eternal as the garden's plants. By the time he returned to his village, the soil was pale dust, lifeless and empty. It is said the garden does not forgive theft. There are other stories, stranger still, of those who lingered too long. At night, they say, the garden changes. The flowers glow faintly under the moonlight, as though drinking from some hidden source of energy not meant for human eyes. The wind falls completely silent, and then there are the whispers, soft, faint voices that seem to come from the rustling leaves, though the words are never clear. Some claim they are warnings, others think they are the voices of those who entered the garden and never returned. Yes, there are those who disappeared. A few wanderers, drawn by curiosity or greed, entered and were never seen again. The villagers believe the garden took them, either keeping them forever or swallowing them whole in its timeless embrace. Those who did return often spoke of a strange distortion of time. What felt like hours spent within its walls turned out to be entire days. Some said they felt they had only just sat down to rest when the sun had already set twice. And then there is the unsettling feeling of being watched. It is something every visitor mentions. When you walk between the rows of flowers, they do not sway gently like normal blooms. They lean subtly, as though tracking your movements. Their petals open and close with no breeze, no touch, almost like breathing. You begin to feel as though the garden is not a place, but a presence. There's an old tale of a hunter who once stumbled upon the garden after being lost in the mountains. He claimed he saw shapes among the trees, faces formed in vines, eyes blinking in the folds of petals. He swore that when he tried to sleep, the roots shifted under the ground, curling around his feet like fingers. He ran the next morning and never returned. Some believe the garden is alive, not just in the simple sense of life, but with memory, intent, and intelligence. It is said to remember every person who has crossed its threshold. It watches them. Some say it waits for something. Standing within its walls, surrounded by perfect deathless beauty, you feel both wonder and unease. It is beautiful, yes, but in the way a frozen painting is beautiful, a scene too perfect, too silent, and too still to be trusted. It is a place that has trapped life, not nurtured it. The mountain that hides 1,000 voices. There is a mountain that does not speak with thunder or wind, but with whispers, soft, layered voices that seem to rise from its very stone. The locals call it the 1,000-tongued peak, though most avoid it entirely. They say that when night falls, the mountain doesn't sleep. It murmurs, sighs, and sometimes even cries out like a living thing. Travelers who have dared to climb its slopes tell unsettling stories. The first thing they notice is the silence of the surrounding land. No birds, no rustle of leaves, just the soft hum of wind curling around the rocks. But as they ascend, the silence breaks. The voices begin faintly, almost like the sound of someone speaking far away. It's never just one voice, always many, overlapping, like 100 conversations taking place just out of reach. Some believe these sounds are caused by the mountain's unusual shape. The peaks and ridges form natural channels, where the wind moves and echoes in ways that mimic speech. Geologists have tried to study it, and while they've confirmed that the mountain does have strange hollow structures inside, they cannot explain why the sounds are so distinct, why they sometimes resemble laughter, or singing, or even sobbing. There is an old legend that says the voices belong to those who vanished on the mountain. Over the centuries, many have entered its caves and never returned. The villagers claim that their spirits are trapped in the stone, forever calling out for someone to hear them. It is said that if you listen too closely, the mountain will call you by name. Some climbers have reported eerie experiences at the peak. One explorer wrote in his journal that he distinctly heard a woman's voice calling for help, even though he was alone. Another claimed to have heard his own mother's voice, though she had died years before, whispering to him to come closer, near the edge of a sheer cliff. Deep within the mountain are labyrinth-like caves that seem almost alive with sound. The walls there are smooth, almost polished, and when you speak, your voice doesn't echo back. Instead, it sounds as though something else is speaking with you, weaving your words into a chorus of whispers. Some believe these caves were once sacred places for an ancient people, a place where priests or shamans could speak to the voices of the earth. What makes the mountain even more mysterious is the presence of strange markings carved into some of its stones, spirals, shapes like eyes, and lines that don't match any known writing. Some think these were left by the people who once lived here, warning others to stay away. Others think the carvings were meant to call forth the voices themselves. One story stands out among the many. A shepherd, centuries ago, climbed the mountain during a storm. When he returned, he was no longer the same. His family said he would sit for hours, staring at nothing, mumbling about voices that wanted to be free. He never climbed again, and to this day his descendants refuse to go near the mountain. Standing at the foot of this place, it is hard not to feel that something ancient lingers there. The voices are not just tricks of air and stone. They feel purposeful, like the mountain itself is trying to remember something, or to warn us. If you were to climb it at night, alone, you might find yourself listening a little too closely, and maybe, just maybe, one of those 1,000 voices would speak directly to you. A forest where no birds sing, only echoes of the past. There is a forest so still that it feels like time itself has forgotten to move there. No birds dart between the trees, no insects hum in the air, and even the wind seems reluctant to pass through. People who step beneath its shadowed canopy often describe the silence as unnatural, too heavy, as if something is pressing down on every sound. The trees here are ancient, their trunks twisted and gnarled, their bark darkened with age. The forest floor is soft with layers of fallen leaves, but when you walk, your footsteps don't echo. Instead, they vanish into the quiet, swallowed whole. And yet, if you listen closely, there is something else. Something faint and unsettling. It's not true silence. Beneath the stillness, there are echoes. The locals say these echoes don't come from the living. They come from the past. Whispered voices that seem to rise and fall in fragments, like distant conversations carried on the wind. Sometimes, if you stand still, you can make out laughter, or weeping, or the faint rhythm of footsteps moving in circles. No one knows where the sounds come from, or who left them behind. Legends claim the forest was once the site of an ancient village, one that vanished after a great fire or a long-forgotten curse. The people who lived there, they say, left their voices behind. It is said that every sound ever made in that place is trapped between the trees, replaying like a memory that never fades. Some believe the forest simply records the life that passes through it, storing the energy of those who've come before, whether human or animal. There are stories of travelers who entered the forest and heard their own voices echoed back, but not the words they had just spoken. Instead, they heard phrases they had never said, as if the forest was answering them in someone else's voice. A few have gone deeper and reported something stranger still, the feeling of being followed by footsteps that aren't there, as though the echoes are no longer just sounds but shadows of the past, walking alongside them. Scientists who've studied the area say it may be due to its unique acoustic properties. The dense trees and uneven ground could be creating pockets where sound bounces and lingers in odd ways. But even they admit that some of the recordings they've captured in the forest don't make sense. Voices speaking in languages no one recognizes, whispers that rise from the ground itself. At the heart of the forest lies a clearing that feels like the center of its mystery. The air there is colder, the silence sharper. Those who've stood in that clearing claim that the echoes become louder, overlapping like a chorus of memories. Some say if you stand there at dusk, the echoes take shape, shadows moving among the trees, faces half seen in the corner of your vision, gone the moment you turn your head. No animals live here, no birds nest in the branches. Even the smallest creatures, mice, insects, snakes, avoid this place. It's as if the forest has no room for the living, only for what has already passed. Those who've left the forest often say the silence follows them. For days, sometimes weeks, they hear faint whispers when they're alone, like a piece of the forest came back with them. It fades eventually, but not for everyone. A few who went in have never spoken again, as though whatever they heard stole their voice. If you ever find yourself near this forest, and the trees begin to close in, remember to listen carefully. It's not the silence you need to fear, it's the echoes, the ones that don't quite sound like you, the ones that belong to someone who isn't there anymore. The voice trapped inside a broken mask. There is a mask that no one dares to wear. A mask said to whisper when the night is quiet and the moonlight touches its surface. It is old, so old that no one remembers who carved it or why. The mask is cracked down one side, a jagged line running through what once might have been a serene face. But it is not the cracks that unsettle those who see it. It is the sound. They say the mask has a voice. It was first unearthed decades ago, buried in the ruins of an ancient settlement swallowed by sand. The archaeologists who found it thought it was just another ceremonial artifact, a relic of some forgotten ritual. Its design was simple yet haunting, a smooth white surface, hollow eyes, and a mouth that seemed frozen mid-breath, as though caught between a scream and a whisper. But when one of the researchers lifted it from the earth, those standing nearby swore they heard something faint, a soft sigh, like someone waking from a long dream. At first, no one believed it. It had to be imagination, the mind playing tricks after hours of digging under the harsh sun. But the strange sound continued. Whenever the mask was moved, it would release a low murmur, a vibration that seemed to travel not just through the air, but through the bones of anyone nearby. One researcher said it felt as though the mask was speaking, but in a language that could only be felt, not heard. The mask was taken to a museum for study, and that is when the real stories began. Guards working the night shift reported hearing whispers coming from the storage room, like a soft voice echoing against the walls. Sometimes the voice sounded like it was calling a name, though none of them could make out what name it was. One guard claimed the whispers grew louder when he got close to the mask, until he could almost understand the words. He quit his job the next day, refusing to return. Scholars began to wonder if the mask had been part of a burial ritual, meant to hold the voice or soul of the dead. In some ancient cultures, masks were used to preserve the identity of the deceased, to give them a voice in the afterlife. Could this mask have done something similar? Could it be holding a voice trapped, unable to move on? When sound technicians examined it, they discovered something peculiar. They placed sensitive microphones near the mask and recorded for hours. In the playback, faint tones emerged, rhythmic, almost like breathing. One section of the recording contained a strange layered sound that resembled chanting, but when they tried to analyze the frequency, it didn't match any known human vocal pattern. One researcher, determined to understand it, made the mistake of putting the mask on. It lasted only seconds. Witnesses say the moment it touched his face, he froze. His entire body stiffened, his eyes rolled back, and he let out a sound, a strange broken voice that wasn't his own. He tore the mask off and collapsed, shaking. When asked what happened, all he could say was, "It spoke through me." He never explained what it said. After that, the museum sealed the mask in a locked case, but that hasn't stopped the voice. Visitors claim that if you press your ear close to the glass, you can hear soft breathing. Some say the mask hums when the building is empty, a low sound like someone humming a forgotten song. There are rumors that the mask doesn't like being hidden. A few believe that the voice inside isn't just trapped, it's waiting for someone who can understand it, someone who will listen long enough to free it. Others fear the opposite, that whatever voice lives inside was never meant to be heard at all, that it belongs to something ancient and restless, something that should have stayed buried. If you ever see the mask, cracked and silent behind glass, don't stare at it too long. Don't listen too closely. They say if you listen for more than a minute, you'll begin to hear it whisper your name, as if it knows you, and once you hear your name, you'll never forget its voice. The girl in the bamboo light. There's a grove of bamboo deep in the hills of a faraway province where the light doesn't fall the way it should. Travelers who pass through it say that the sunlight scatters strangely, breaking into slivers of gold and pale green that seem almost alive. The locals call this place the Bamboo Light, and they speak of a girl who walks there, a figure who appears only when the world is at its quietest, just before dusk or in the heavy silence after midnight. No one remembers when the stories began. The oldest villagers say the girl has always been there, watching from between the swaying bamboo stalks. They describe her as small and graceful, her black hair loose, her pale dress glowing faintly, as if it catches a light no one else can see. Some claim she's barefoot, though her steps make no sound on the soft earth. What unsettles people most is that she never seems to look at you directly. She tilts her head as if listening, as though waiting for you to speak first. Legend says she isn't alive in the way we are. She's a remnant, a memory of someone who once walked the same path, maybe hundreds of years ago. There are whispers of a girl who disappeared long ago, taken from her village during a storm. Some say she drowned in a river nearby. Others believe she was lost in the woods and never found. But when the bamboo sways and the sun filters through like thin golden threads, they say you can see her standing there, her figure caught between the light and shadow. People who have seen her describe the moment as quiet but heavy, as if time slows. One traveler recounted walking through the grove at sunset, when the bamboo was glowing with the softest green light. He felt the air change, colder yet still, and when he turned she was there, standing no more than a few steps away, her face half hidden by her hair. She didn't speak, but he swore he could hear something, like a faint humming or the whisper of wind moving through hollow bamboo. He ran, and the humming followed him until he left the grove. Others say the girl isn't dangerous, just lonely. A woodcutter once claimed he left an offering of rice near the grove, and when he returned the next day the bowl was empty, but there were no footprints in the dirt. Another traveler said he spoke softly to her, asking who she was. The girl tilted her head and stepped into the sunlight, and for a moment her dress shone like water reflecting the moon. Then she vanished. But there are darker stories too. Some believe the girl lures people deeper into the bamboo. A hunter from a nearby town swears he followed her once thinking she was a lost child. No matter how fast he walked, she was always just a few steps ahead. When he realized how deep he had gone, he turned around, and the path was gone. It took him 3 days to find his way back, and he would never speak of what he saw at night when the light faded. The bamboo grove itself feels alive, even when there is no wind. The stalks creak and shift as if they're whispering to each other. If you go there at night, you might see strange patterns of light moving across the ground, like the reflection of water where no water flows. Some say that's her way of guiding you, though no one knows where it leads. The girl in the bamboo light remains one of those mysteries that can't be explained by logic or science. Is she a ghost, a spirit of the forest, or just a story passed down so many times that people start to believe they see her? No one knows. All they know is this: if you find yourself walking through a quiet bamboo grove at dusk and the light begins to shimmer unnaturally, don't stop, don't look for her, and if you do see her standing there, silent and watching, don't follow the light. The walls that remember a lost voice. There is an abandoned house on the edge of a forgotten road, a structure so weathered by time that it seems to lean on the wind just to stay upright. The locals say it is empty, that no one has lived there for decades. Yet those who step inside swear they can still hear it, the faint sound of someone speaking, whispering, as though the walls themselves are trying to remember the voice of someone long gone. The house was once grand, or so the old photographs suggest. Cracked plaster hints at carved patterns that must have once been beautiful. The wooden beams, now warped and splintered, carry faint traces of paint, the last remnants of a life that was carefully built and then abandoned. And it's in these walls, hollow and worn, where the voice lingers. Some hear it as a murmur, a breathless tone carried by the creak of the floorboards. Others say it's clearer, almost like someone reciting words they can't quite understand, words that fade before they fully form. The first to notice it were travelers seeking shelter from a storm. They said that when the rain began to beat against the broken windows, the sound inside the house didn't match the rhythm of the weather. It was as though another sound was layered beneath it, like someone quietly humming. One of them swore he heard his name spoken, soft as a sigh, coming from the walls behind him. They left that night and never returned. There is an old story about the woman who once lived there. She was a singer, a woman with a voice so beautiful that people from neighboring towns would gather to hear her sing in the evenings. Her voice filled the house, so they say, echoing through the halls and spilling out into the quiet fields. But something happened, something no one can quite agree on. Some say her love left her for another. Others whisper that tragedy took him, and she was left alone. Whatever the truth, her songs stopped. They say the silence broke her, that she wandered the house for days, speaking to no one, until one morning she was simply gone. When people dared to enter the house years later, they noticed something strange. If you stood still in certain rooms, especially in the evenings, when the light turned gold and soft, the walls seemed to sigh, not with the wind, but with something else, something that felt alive. Some visitors described hearing a faint melody, not from outside, but from inside the walls, as though the voice of the woman had soaked into the wood and plaster, refusing to fade even as time moved on. One craftsman who repaired part of the ceiling decades ago claimed that when he struck a section of the wall with his hammer, a soft sound came back, like a note being plucked from a string. He stopped, listening, and for a moment, he swore he heard someone humming the very note his hammer had awakened. He left the job unfinished, saying the house felt too alive. Some believe the voice is not a ghost, but a memory of the house itself. Old places, after all, seem to carry echoes of the people who lived in them. The walls may not speak in words, but they remember. Each scrape, each laugh, each quiet cry leaves an imprint. And this house with its crumbling frame might simply be repeating what it cannot forget. If you visit, you might not hear anything at first. The voice is shy, quiet, almost testing you, but stay too long, and you may start to notice things, soft murmurs when you pass the hallway, the faint hum of a note just behind you. Some say that if you listen carefully enough, you can hear a song, a broken, wordless melody, looping again and again, as though waiting for someone to sing along and finish it. And when you finally leave, you might find that the silence outside feels too sharp, as though the house is still calling you back, still waiting for someone to remember the voice it carries. What the stone knobs might still be saying. On a windswept plateau, far from any village or road, stand a scattering of strange stones. They are not tall like standing monoliths, or neatly carved like temple pillars. Instead, they are low, round and oddly shaped, like giant knobs rising from the earth, weathered by centuries of rain and sun. Some are barely a foot high, others reach the waist, but all share one uncanny feature. Their tops are smooth, as if countless hands once touched them, turning or pressing, like the controls of a forgotten machine. No one knows who placed them here. The stones are not naturally occurring. They are too precisely arranged, too uniform in their size and spacing. Some form curving lines that spiral outward, others cluster like points on an invisible map. When the wind moves across the plateau, it seems to whistle through the gaps between the stones, producing low, resonant tones that shift with the breeze. Locals call it the talking field, as if the stones themselves are murmuring in some ancient tongue. The earliest mention of these stone knobs appears in travelers' journals from centuries ago. A merchant passing through the region described them as strange round teeth biting out of the ground. He claimed that when he placed his palm on one of them, he felt a vibration, soft but steady, as though the earth beneath was alive and humming. Others have repeated this experience, saying that certain stones seem warm to the touch even on the coldest mornings, while others feel icy, as if storing some memory of a different world. Archaeologists who've studied the site have conflicting theories. Some believe the knobs are remnants of an ancient mechanism, a form of primitive astronomical calendar aligned with the stars. When viewed from above, a few of the formations line up perfectly with solstice points on the horizon. Others dismiss this as coincidence, arguing that the stones might be markers for burial grounds or forgotten boundaries. But the strange part is that no remains have ever been found beneath them. Digging only reveals more stone, as if the knobs are connected to a larger structure buried deep below the surface. At night, the place feels different. Travelers who camp near the plateau speak of faint sounds like whispers threading through the air. Some describe hearing soft knocking or tapping, as if the stones are answering one another. A few claim to have seen pale lights weaving between the formations, hovering for a moment before vanishing. Skeptics say it's just the wind or tricks of the eye, but those who have stood there under the moonlight insist it feels like something is trying to speak, a conversation too old for us to understand. There's a local legend about the knobs, passed down quietly through generations. The story tells of a people who could speak to the earth, using the stones as a kind of language. Each knob, they say, was like a note in a song, and when touched in the right pattern, they would wake the ground. Some even whisper that the knobs still carry echoes of those voices, and that if you listen closely, you might hear them, faint, distant, like the memory of a chant carried across centuries. The plateau itself feels untouched by time. Grass grows between the stones, but no trees or shrubs dare to root too close. Birds seem to avoid landing there, and even animals give the place a wide berth, moving silently along its edges, as if they sense something we can't. Standing among the stones, you might feel a peculiar stillness, as though the world is waiting for you to press one of those smooth, cold surfaces, and see what happens. What the stone knobs might still be saying, is anyone's guess. Perhaps they are nothing but weathered markers, relics of a forgotten ritual, or perhaps they are keys, silent, patient, waiting for the right hands to unlock whatever memory they hold. And if you stand there, in the wind and the quiet, with your hand resting on one of those ancient shapes, you might wonder, are you listening to the stones, or are they listening to you? The forgotten sound of ancient tools in the far corners of old excavation sites, where the wind carries the scent of dust and stone. There are moments when archaeologists swear they hear something, a faint ringing, the soft scrape of metal against rock, the echo of a hammer long since stilled. These are not the sounds of modern machines or footsteps on loose soil, but something older, something that feels like memory trapped in the stones themselves. The world has always been shaped by tools, yet the tools that shaped the earliest civilizations have all but vanished. We know their results, the perfectly cut stones of ancient temples, the intricate carvings etched into granite, the seamless blocks that form walls so precise that a blade of grass cannot fit between them. But the tools, they are mostly gone, eroded by time, or buried in the earth, their purpose left to speculation. In certain forgotten workshops, unearthed in deserts and high plateaus, archaeologists have found clues, tiny grooves on stone, patterns that do not match any chisel or hammer we know of. Some artifacts are marked by what look like rapid, circular cuts, as if made by drills far more advanced than anything we credit to those who lived thousands of years ago. The silence of these tools, their absence, is as loud as any mystery. There's one site in particular, buried beneath layers of sand in what is now southern Egypt. The place is nothing more than ruins now, walls barely standing, a scatter of pottery, the faint outline of what may have been a workshop. But when researchers placed sensitive audio equipment around the site, they picked up low, rhythmic vibrations, almost like the sound of grinding stone far beneath the earth. Could it be the shifting of bedrock, or is the ground still carrying the faint hum of tools that once rang out across this forgotten yard? Old texts speak of tools that sang chisels said to produce tones when struck, not unlike tuning forks, vibrating with a resonance that could split or shape rock without brute force. Some say that the sound of a tool was as important as its shape, that craftsmen listened for the right frequency, the right echo, as they worked. In this way, they didn't just cut the stone, they tuned it, as if the rock itself was an instrument waiting to be played. Legends whisper of tools made not of bronze or iron, but of materials we no longer understand. In some regions of South America, stories tell of whistling stones, where builders would line up blocks and hum in strange patterns before they were set into place. Was it ritual, or was there a secret knowledge of sound, resonance and vibration that we've lost entirely? Imagine standing in an ancient workshop, the smell of heated metal and dust in the air, the ring of tools creating a rhythm that matched the heartbeat of the workers. Those sounds shaped history, each strike, each scrape, each polish, and yet now we hear only silence when we walk through the ruins. It's like reading a book with every other word erased, trying to piece together meaning from fragments, and perhaps that's the haunting part. We can see their work all around us, the perfectly aligned stones of Machu Picchu, the smooth channels carved into bedrock in Petra, the columns of temples rising with impossible precision, but we can't hear the world they lived in. We can't hear the sound of those tools singing against stone. Every once in a while, during excavation, a single fragment of a tool emerges, an oddly shaped piece of copper, a polished stone that feels strange in the hand, its edges worn in ways we can't replicate. Experts analyze these fragments, hoping to find answers, but the truth is that the sound of those tools, the way they were wielded, the resonance they produced has faded, or maybe it hasn't. Maybe the stones themselves still hold the memory of it. When the wind slides across the ruins and produces a faint whistle, when a cave hums softly under the touch of your hand, is it just the echo of nature, or are we hearing the last faint trace of a world once built by hands that knew how to make stone sing? The wall that bleeds when the sun sets. There is a place deep in the countryside, far from any road or town, where a single wall stands alone in a field of quiet grass. It is not part of a ruin or a house. There are no other stones around it to suggest what it once belonged to. It rises out of the earth like a memory that refuses to fade. By day it is dull and grey, weathered with cracks, lichen and moss. It looks like nothing, just an old slab of forgotten rock. But if you stay there long enough, if you wait for the sun to sink low on the horizon, you will witness something that most people cannot believe, even when they see it with their own eyes. As the last light of the sun touches the wall, something begins to seep out of the stone, thick, dark red streaks, glistening like fresh blood. At first, you might think it's just a trick of the light. Maybe the stone is stained. Maybe the evening sun is just painting it with a strange glow. But then you see the droplets form, slow and deliberate, trailing down the cracks like tears. You step closer, and it becomes impossible to deny. The wall is bleeding. It's not fast or violent. It's a slow, heavy seep, as though something deep within the stone is alive and pressing outward. And then the air around you changes. The breeze stops, and the world goes silent. You feel as if something old and heavy has stirred awake. The locals know about this wall. They call it the Red Veil. They warn visitors not to linger there after sunset, not to touch it, and certainly not to watch it for too long. It is said that those who press their hand against the wall when it bleeds feel something move beneath their palm, a slow vibration, like a heartbeat, faint but undeniable. There are whispers of people who tried this and later found themselves haunted by strange dreams, dreams of narrow, dark rooms and muffled voices crying out from behind the stone. No one knows how old the wall is. There is no record of it being part of any building or settlement. The land around it is empty, the ground uneven and scarred by time. But there is an old story passed down among the villagers, a story of a king who built a fortress here long ago. He was feared and cruel, and when he captured those who opposed him, he did not simply kill them. Instead, he ordered them to be sealed alive inside the walls of his stronghold. The legend says that the wall you see today is the last fragment of that fortress, and that the blood that seeps from it at sunset is not just water or rust, it is the memory of those who were entombed alive, their voices still trapped inside. Travelers who have stood near the wall swear they can feel the ground beneath them hum softly, almost like a pulse, as if the earth itself remembers what happened here. Some claim that if you listen closely, when the bleeding begins, you can hear faint murmurs, as though the stone itself is whispering in a language too old to understand. One man, a traveler from the city, once said he saw shapes moving across the surface of the wall, faces, faint and pale, shifting like smoke trapped inside glass. He ran from the place and never returned. In the 1970s, a group of scientists and researchers tried to investigate the phenomenon. They brought modern instruments to measure moisture and temperature, to take samples from the wall. They even placed sensors to record vibrations, but the results were strange and inconsistent. The wall showed an unusually high concentration of iron, but also traces of organic compounds normally found in blood and tissue. One researcher, a woman named Dr. Elena Voss, reported feeling an unnatural pressure in her chest when she stood close to the wall during sunset, as though something inside the stone was pushing its presence outward. Not long after returning home, she abandoned her research entirely, saying that the wall had followed her in her dreams. Those who are brave or foolish enough to stay there until the bleeding stops describe an eerie silence afterward. Once the sun has fully disappeared, the red streaks dry and fade as if they were never there, leaving the stone grey and cold once more. But the quiet that follows is not normal. It is the kind of silence that makes you feel watched. Some travelers have reported hearing faint footsteps circling them in the grass, though no one is there. Others have seen flickers of movement out of the corner of their eye, shadows shifting against a wall that should not have shadows. One tale speaks of a man who tried to chip a piece of the stone away, hoping to bring home proof of the bleeding wall. He struck it with a hammer, but the hammer cracked instead. He tried again, harder, and this time the ground trembled beneath his feet. A dark line appeared on the wall where he had struck, as though it had been wounded. Frightened, he left, but days later the man was found dead in his bed, his hands covered in strange red stains that no one could wash away. The villagers took this as a warning. The wall is not to be touched or broken. It stands as it is, and it will remain that way. If you ever find yourself there, alone, as the sun sets, the wall will seem different than any stone you've ever seen. It is not just cold and solid, it feels as if something is inside it, something waiting. When the first red streaks appear, you might find it hard to look away. It's almost mesmerizing, the way the liquid gleams in the dim light, rolling down the cracks in slow, deliberate lines. Some say if you stare too long you'll see images in the reflection of the red surface, moments from a past that no one living remembers. A soldier standing on a wall, a prisoner crying in the dark, a face screaming silently from inside. And when you finally turn to leave, when you walk away from that strange place, you will feel as though the wall is watching you. You might hear faint echoes behind you, soft scraping sounds like nails against stone or whispers too low to understand. And you will wonder, as you walk faster, whether the wall will still be bleeding long after you're gone, silently marking another sunset in a place where time and memory bleed together. The hill where night refuses to fall. There is a hill that locals speak of only in hushed tones, a place that seems to ignore the natural rhythm of the world. It sits alone on the edge of a quiet plain, its slopes covered with stubborn grass that never seems to wilt. From a distance it looks ordinary, just another hill under the wide sky. But as you approach, you notice something strange. The shadows here don't deepen the way they should. Sunset comes, but night doesn't fall, not completely. The hill seems to hold on to the light, as if refusing to let the dark take over. Travelers who have spent time there say the world feels wrong on that hill. Even when the stars are shining in the distance, and the rest of the land lies in darkness, the summit glows faintly, bathed in a dim, ghostly light that comes from nowhere. It isn't the moon, it isn't the reflection of distant cities. The light feels old, heavy, and unchanging, like the last fading glow of a fire that never burns out. The locals say the hill is cursed, but not in a way that feels evil, more like it's trapped in a memory. There's an old legend about a battle fought here, hundreds of years ago, between two rival kings. The story goes that the sun had just begun to set when the battle reached its bloodiest moment. The kings and their armies clashed on the hilltop, swords flashing, shields breaking, and cries echoing into the night. But as the first king fell, mortally wounded, he cursed the land, swearing that night would never come to claim him. The sun, they say, hesitated on the horizon, and since then the hill has never truly known darkness. There's a darker version of the story too, one that whispers of an ancient altar buried beneath the hill. Some say this was not a battlefield, but a place of sacrifice, where priests once called upon the sun to bless their people, but one ritual went wrong. The sacrifice was not accepted, and the hill was condemned to stay halfway between day and night, its soil never allowed to rest in true darkness. What unsettles visitors most is the silence. Even when the wind blows across the plain, it seems to avoid the top of the hill. No birds roost there, no insects chirp. When the world around you grows dim, the hill remains stubbornly bright, and the quiet is so deep, it feels like standing inside a held breath. Some say the silence isn't empty at all, but filled with something you can't hear, like a low hum, a vibration buried in the ground. Those who've camped there tell strange stories. One man swore he stayed on the hill for only a few hours, but when he came down he found that 2 days had passed. Another traveler, a woman who had wandered there at dusk, claimed that the light on the hill became brighter as the night deepened everywhere else, so bright she could see her own shadow even under a starless sky. She said the air was warm, almost suffocating, and she felt as if she were being watched from all directions, though she was completely alone. There are ruins scattered at the foot of the hill, stones arranged in a half circle, worn smooth, as if they'd been touched by countless hands. No one knows who built them. Archaeologists who visited the site in the 1960s said the stones didn't match the local geology, as if they'd been dragged there from far away. Some of the stones have faint markings, scratches that resemble symbols but are too worn to decipher. One of the researchers suggested they might be fragments of a sundial, but no one could explain why they faced inward, not out. The strangest thing happens if you stand at the summit at the exact moment the sun dips below the horizon. For a few seconds you see the sky split. Half of it is deepening into night, while the other half glows with a lingering, impossible twilight. It's like standing between two worlds, with one foot in the day and the other in something beyond day and night. People say that if you stare too long during this moment, you feel a pull, like the hill wants to keep you there, trapped in its light forever. There are warnings not to stay past midnight, not because of danger you can see, but because of what you might hear. The villagers say the hill begins to whisper after the rest of the world has gone dark. Faint voices ride the still air, murmuring words no one can understand. Some claim they hear the sounds of battle, metal clashing, the distant cries of men who've long turned to dust. Others say the voices call their name, urging them to step further into the glow, to never leave. Scientists have tried to study the hill, but nothing unusual shows up on their instruments. There is no measurable light source, no magnetic anomaly, no radiation, and yet every person who's been there agrees, the hill feels alive. Not in the way a forest or a river feels alive, but in the way something watches. Standing there you might notice your shadow stretching in the wrong direction. You might feel the strange weight of time slowing, as if minutes are drawn out like hours. And when you finally step down, leaving the summit behind, the darkness rushes back all at once, almost startling, as though you've crossed a threshold between the hill's stubborn glow and the normal world. Those who return speak of dreams that follow them, dreams filled with endless twilight, with voices calling from the horizon. Some wake in the middle of the night, convinced they can see the hill glowing faintly, even from miles away. No one knows if the hill is haunted by memory, by the past, or by something far older. The window that opens to another century. There is a building on the edge of a forgotten town, crumbling quietly into the weeds and dust, where a single window has become the center of stories too strange to dismiss. The house itself is nothing remarkable. Wooden beams weathered grey, a roof sagging with age, but the window on the upper floor, framed by peeling paint, seems to hold something that defies the natural order of time. Those who dare to look through it say they don't see the world as it is. They don't see the cracked road outside or the rusted fences. Instead, they see another world, one that seems to belong to another century. Some describe carriages moving along dirt paths where now there is only gravel and overgrown fields. Others say they see people in old-fashioned clothes, carrying baskets, their faces calm and unaware of the one who is watching them. The first stories about the window came from children, as these tales often do. A boy, chasing a ball through the yard, glanced up and swore he saw a woman in a dark dress, her hair pinned high, looking out from the upstairs window. When he told his parents, they dismissed it. No one had lived in that house for decades. But the boy insisted, and soon others began to notice strange things. People passing by at dusk would sometimes catch a flicker of movement behind the glass, or the faint glow of candlelight even though the house was abandoned and empty. Eventually, curiosity got the better of a few brave souls. They went inside, expecting to find someone squatting there. But the house was bare, dust thick on the floors, cobwebs stretched across corners, every room silent. And yet, when one man climbed the creaking stairs and stood before the infamous window, he felt something odd, like the air on the other side of the glass was thicker, heavier. He peered out, and the modern town was gone. Instead, he saw a dirt road winding between fields of wheat, a wooden cart drawn by horses creaking in the distance. He stepped back, startled, and the vision vanished. When he looked again, he saw only the normal view of weeds and the cracked road, but the memory of what he'd seen lingered, as clear as if it had been real. Word spread, as it always does. The house became a quiet curiosity for locals, though few dared to approach after dark. Some who did claimed the window glowed faintly at midnight, as though lit by an unseen lantern. Others swore they saw silhouettes moving inside, shadows of people who shouldn't be there. One story tells of a woman who, on a dare, touched the glass. She said it felt warm, like sunlight, even though the night outside was freezing. For a moment, the world on the other side rippled like water. She thought she heard faint music, old music, the kind played on violins and flutes at village dances long ago. A few believe the window isn't just showing the past, but is a doorway, thin as a breath, between this century and another. There are whispers of a man who vanished there. According to local legend, he had grown obsessed with the window, visiting night after night, convinced he could see the same woman the boy had described years earlier. One evening, he climbed through. His friends found his footprints on the dusty floor, leading to the windowsill, but none returning. They never saw him again. What makes the story stranger is that some who look through the window claim to see the same figures, always the same carriage, the same man leading the horses, the same children chasing one another in the distance. It is as if the window is locked to a single day, replaying a moment from long ago. But sometimes, the figures seem to notice the watcher. A man once said he saw one of the children stop running, turn, and look right at him, through the window. He swore the child's eyes were full of confusion, as though the boy could see into our world. Researchers have visited over the years, trying to find an explanation. They've measured the glass, examined the wood, looked for tricks of light. Some suggested the glass was made of old materials that distort reflections, creating ghostly images. But that doesn't explain why multiple people describe the same exact scene, even when they look through the window at different times. Locals avoid the house now. It stands quietly, waiting, the window always clean despite the rest of the house rotting away. It's as if something on the other side keeps it that way, as though someone still looks out, waiting for you to look in. If you were to stand there, alone in the dusk, you might feel it too. The sense that time isn't as solid as we think, that beyond that pane of glass, the past hasn't ended. It's still alive, still breathing, waiting for someone to step through. The village that wakes only once every century. There are stories whispered in the corners of old inns and around dying campfires, tales of a village that doesn't belong to the maps or the modern world. They say it lies deep in the folds of a mountain valley, hidden by forests so dense and quiet that even the birds seem reluctant to pass overhead. No one knows exactly where it is, only that once every 100 years, the village wakes. Not wakes in the way a place comes to life when travelers visit. No, the village itself, the very stones and timbers, seem to stir from a century-long sleep. Its wooden houses, weathered and perfect, creak softly like old bones stretching. The streets, usually buried in mist and silence, fill with pale light as if the sun has returned just for them. The stories say that when the village is awake, it looks as though time has forgotten it. There are no wires, no cars, no signs of the modern world. Instead, lanterns burn in the windows, casting warm pools of golden light on cobblestone paths. Doors swing open to reveal rooms filled with handmade furniture and tools no one has used for centuries. And perhaps strangest of all, there are people, villagers dressed in clothes from another age, moving through their routines as though no time has passed since the last waking. The few who claim to have stumbled upon the village all tell a similar tale. They arrive lost, usually after wandering too far off the path, guided by nothing but the strange feeling that someone or something is watching. Then through the trees, they see it, smoke rising from stone chimneys, the distant sound of bells, voices speaking a language they can't quite place. No one ever spends long there. Those who have tried say the villagers are polite but distant, their faces pale as if lit from within. They answer questions with soft smiles but little else. It is as if they know they are not meant to linger in this world, and there's always a feeling, a heavy pressing awareness, that the village will not stay awake for long. One traveler's account, written in a journal found decades later, describes a meal in the village square. She said the food tasted rich but strange, like flavors from another century, herbs and spices she couldn't name. The villagers sat with her, eating in silence, their eyes glancing often to the horizon, as though watching for something no one could see. She left just before dawn, and when she returned with a search party 2 days later, there was nothing. No village, no smoke, no voices. The valley where she swore the streets had been was empty, just wild grass and scattered stones, as if no one had ever lived there at all. Some believe the village is cursed, trapped in a loop of time, waking for a single day, every 100 years to relive the same hours before vanishing again. Others whisper that the villagers are not alive in the way we understand, but are memories, shadows, or echoes of those who once lived and cannot move on. There is one unsettling detail in every story: if you hear the bell toll at midnight, you must leave before dawn. Those who don't, the tales say, are never seen again. Perhaps they become part of the village, frozen in its endless dream. Even now, explorers and wanderers search the mountains, hoping to find this place before it sleeps again. But maybe it is better not to. Maybe the village isn't meant to be found, not by those who live on this side of time. The face carved into a tree that wasn't there yesterday. There is a certain tree that the villagers avoid, not because it is dead or twisted or cursed in any obvious way, but because sometimes, when the morning light cuts through the mist, the tree is not the same as it was the night before. The stories say it began with a woodcutter. He was an ordinary man, the kind who spent his life splitting logs and shaping planks, who knew the woods like the lines of his own hand. One autumn evening, while walking home, He passed an old oak that had stood in the forest for as long as anyone could remember. It was an ordinary tree, then weathered bark, thick branches, nothing strange about it. But when he returned the next morning, there was a face, not carved in the crude way of knives or tools. The lines were too fine, the features too lifelike. It looked as though the face had always been part of the tree, grown out of the grain itself. The eyes were closed, the lips slightly parted, and there was a softness to it, like a face dreaming. The woodcutter told no one at first, thinking maybe he had imagined it, or that some prankster had done it overnight. But by the third morning, the face had changed. The eyes were open now, and though they were made of bark and shadow, they seemed to be watching him. Word spread quickly. Villagers came to see it for themselves. Some said it looked like a woman, others thought it was the face of a child. But what unsettled everyone was that it didn't stay the same. Each day the expression shifted. Sometimes it looked peaceful, other times mournful, and on rare mornings it looked angry, jaw clenched, eyes narrowed, as if the tree itself disapproved of being stared at. One man, bold or foolish, tried to cut into the bark to see if the face was just a trick of wood and weather. His axe never reached it. Just as the blade was about to strike, the tree split a branch above his head, dropping it so close that it knocked him to the ground. He left the woods that day and never returned. The face, however, kept changing, and then one day there were more of them. Not just one face in one tree, but others, scattered through the forest. Faces of men and women, some familiar, some not. The villagers whispered that they looked like the dead, people who had passed away years ago, now returned in the silent wood, their features etched into bark, as though the trees were keeping their memory alive. The strangest part, no one ever saw the carvings appear. You could walk through the woods in the evening, find nothing unusual, and by morning, a face would be waiting, watching. Some say the forest is alive, not just with roots and leaves, but with thought and memory, that the trees listen to the whispers of the living and the last breaths of the dying, capturing pieces of their souls in wood. Others believe that the faces are warnings, messages from something older than the village, older than the forest itself. There's one tale of a traveler who slept near the face tree. He was found the next day, alive but shaken, muttering that he had dreamed of being inside the tree, of roots twisting around him, holding him in place. He swore the face on the bark had been his own. No one goes near the tree at night anymore. By day, they keep their distance, casting quick glances, but never lingering too long. And yet, every so often someone swears they've seen a new face, one they recognize, even though the person it resembles is still alive. The tree stands there still, deep in the woods, waiting, and if you were to walk through that forest tomorrow, who's to say what face you might find staring back at you? The clock that keeps time for the dead. There is a clock that does not belong to this world. It stands alone in the hallway of a crumbling estate on the edge of a forgotten countryside, its wooden frame twisted with age, and its brass face dulled by centuries of dust. No one remembers who built it. No one remembers who wound it last. Yet, no matter how many decades pass, its pendulum swings with a slow, steady rhythm, as if it is not keeping the time of the living, but the silent hours of the dead. The villagers speak of the clock in low tones, as though to mention it too loudly might draw its attention. They say that at midnight it does not chime 12 times like ordinary clocks. It strikes 13, an unnatural sound that rolls through the estate like a warning. Some claim that during the 13th chime, the air grows cold and the shadows along the hallway stretch longer than they should, reaching out like grasping fingers. The story of the clock begins with its maker, a watchmaker who was not like other craftsmen. He did not build clocks for the homes of the wealthy or the walls of churches. He built clocks that were meant to keep a different kind of time, the time that lingers between life and death, the moments we cannot see but can sometimes feel. They say he forged the gears of this clock from the rusted gates of a graveyard, melted down into strange dark iron. Its hands, thin and pale, are shaped like the delicate bones of a bird. The clock's chimes are unlike any sound you've ever heard. They don't ring like metal striking metal. They resonate like distant bells heard through heavy fog, as if the sound is coming from somewhere far beyond this world. People who have stood close when it chimes say they feel the sound not just in their ears but in their bones. The last caretaker of the estate, a man who lived alone for decades, used to tell unsettling stories about the clock. He claimed that it didn't just measure hours but lives. He said he would hear it chime unexpectedly, sometimes long before midnight, and each time it happened someone in the village would die within the week. He swore that the clock was marking their final hour before they even knew it had come. One night, the caretaker tried to stop the clock. He lifted the heavy glass panel and froze its pendulum with his hand. The air around him grew icy, and the silence that followed was so deep it made his ears ring. He left it still, thinking he had won, but by morning the clock was ticking again, its pendulum swinging as though nothing had touched it. He never tried again. There are rumors of others who have tampered with the clock. A woman once came to the estate, believing the clock's mechanisms contained gold. She pried open its back panel, and found not gold, but a thin strip of parchment wedged between the gears. Written in faded black ink was a single line: "This time is not yours." No one knows what became of her after that day. The most disturbing stories are about what happens when the clock strikes 13. Some visitors claim that during that extra chime, the house itself seems to shift, like the walls are breathing. Others have heard whispers between the chimes, faint voices murmuring names they recognize, names of people long dead. The clock does not show the time like other clocks. Its hands move steadily, but sometimes they pause for a heartbeat just long enough to make your breath catch. If you stare too long, you may notice something strange. The rhythm of its pendulum begins to match your heartbeat, and then, without realizing, your heartbeat starts to match its rhythm until the two are perfectly aligned. The villagers believe the clock is alive, in its own way. They say it is powered not by springs or gears, but by the weight of memories and the passing of souls. It counts not minutes or hours, but every final breath taken by those nearby. When a villager dies, they swear the clock's hands turn backward for a single moment, as if recording the moment of departure. No one dares to live in the estate now. It has been abandoned for decades, and the walls are covered in moss and peeling paint. Yet every traveler who passes through the empty hallway reports the same thing. The clock is still there, still ticking, its pendulum swinging in endless silence. It does not stop, it does not age, it waits. There is an unsettling story told by one of the few who dared to visit after dark. He claimed that as he stood in front of the clock, the glass face fogged over as if someone had breathed on it from inside. He leaned closer and saw faint words traced in the mist, his own name, written backward. He left without looking back, and he never spoke of the clock again. If you stand before it at dusk, just as the last light of the sun vanishes, you might hear it too, the low hum of its gears, a sound so steady it feels almost like a heartbeat. And in that moment you might wonder, is it your heart you're hearing, or the heart of something that has been watching for centuries? The well that reflects a different sky. There is an old well that stands at the center of an overgrown field, far from any path or village. No one remembers who built it, or why it was dug in a place where no settlements exist. Its stones are blackened with age, its rim cracked and uneven, but it still holds water, water that has not dried for as long as anyone can remember. At first glance, it seems like any other forgotten well, but if you look down into it, you'll see something that will make your breath catch. The reflection staring back is not the sky above you. Travelers who have stumbled across this well often describe a strange unease, as if the air around it is heavier, quieter, birds do not sing near it, and even the wind seems to avoid the clearing. If you lean over and peer into the water, expecting to see clouds or the sun, you'll see a sky that doesn't match your own. On clear days, the reflection shows heavy storm clouds rolling over a land you can't see. At night, when the stars above are still and familiar, the water below is alive with constellations no one can name, arranged in patterns that don't exist on any known map of the heavens. Some say the well shows another world, a place running alongside ours but out of reach. Others think it's a memory, a reflection of skies from a time long gone. A few, more cautious, whisper that it is not another world we see, but the future, or worse, a sky belonging to something that watches back. The oldest stories about the well come from wandering shepherds who used to cross the field generations ago. They said the well could predict storms. If lightning flickered in the water's reflection, rain would follow within days. But there were darker stories too. On nights when the moon was thin, they said the well's reflection would glow faintly, as though lit by some unseen fire. One man, a young shepherd who dared to lean too far over the edge, swore that he saw not only a different sky but strange shapes moving through it, things that didn't look like birds or clouds, but something far larger, drifting silently in the dark. There are tales of people who became obsessed with the well. A traveler once camped nearby, returning to it each night, convinced that if he stared long enough, he'd understand what it was trying to show him. Villagers who found him weeks later said he hadn't slept, his eyes hollow and sunken. He kept murmuring the same thing. It's not water, it's a window. No one knows what happened to him after that. Attempts to explore the well have always failed. A group of researchers once lowered a camera into the darkness, hoping to see the bottom, but as the rope descended, the screen showed something impossible. Instead of stone walls and shadows, it captured rolling clouds, flashes of light, and a vast alien sky. Then, without warning, the feed cut out. When they pulled the camera back up, its lens was cracked from the inside, as though something had pressed against it. Local superstition warns never to touch the water. Those who have tried say it feels wrong. Too cold, almost metallic, like dipping your hand into liquid glass. One farmer who ignored the warnings claimed that when he touched the surface, the reflection rippled and showed him his own face, but older, broken, with hollow eyes. He left the field screaming and never returned. There's also a strange phenomenon that happens when you stand at the edge for too long. People have reported feeling a subtle pull, as if the well itself is drawing them closer. Not a physical force, but something deeper. A quiet whisper at the edge of their thoughts, inviting them to lean just a little further, to see just a little more. On rare occasions, the well's reflection doesn't just show another sky, it changes entirely. A few claim that during a blood-red sunset, the water turns black as ink, and for a brief moment it reflects something else altogether, not a sky, but a face, always a different face, always staring back, as though trapped beneath the surface. No one dares to fill or destroy the well. A legend says that if you try to block it, the sky it reflects will no longer be contained, and whatever world lies beyond will pour through. It's only a story, of course, but no one is willing to test it. If you ever find yourself near this field, you might be tempted to look down into its depths. If you do, remember this: what you see may not be a reflection at all, it may be something looking up. The lantern that burns without a flame. There is a story whispered among travelers of a lantern that shines where no fire lives, a light that glows without heat, without smoke, and without explanation. It is said to be older than the roads themselves, older than the villages that now scatter the hills. Some call it a miracle. Others say it is a warning, left behind by those who knew something we have forgotten. The lantern is not easily found. It hangs in the remains of a stone arch, half buried by centuries of soil and vines, at the end of a path most maps refuse to acknowledge. Those who have seen it describe a light unlike any flame, a soft golden shimmer that hums faintly, as though the lantern itself is alive. It never flickers, never dims, no matter how the wind howls or the rain pours. Even the fiercest storm does not touch its glow. There are rumors about what happens when you stand near it. Some claim the lantern breathes, not in the way fire breathes when fed with air, but in a slow, rhythmic way, as if inhaling and exhaling something unseen. If you stay long enough, you may feel your own heartbeat falling in step with the pulse of that strange light. It's said that time feels slower there, as though the world outside the lantern has stepped back. The metal frame of the lantern is corroded with age, green with patina, and worn smooth where fingers have brushed against it over generations. And yet, the glass is flawless, clearer than water, unbroken, despite the storms and seasons that have passed. No one can agree on what powers it. Some say it's the trapped soul of a wanderer who never found their way home, their spirit bound to shine until someone else takes their place. Others believe the lantern marks the entrance to something hidden, an old city swallowed by earth, or a place where the dead still walk. There's a tale of a man who tried to take it. He arrived in the nearest village days later, pale and trembling, holding nothing but an empty chain. He could not remember his own name, only a single phrase he repeated again and again: "The light does not want to leave." Some villagers claim that on certain nights the lantern's glow spreads farther than usual, casting a circle of warmth over the forgotten archway. Travelers who pass by on these nights often find objects, coins, carved stones, or small trinkets, placed carefully in the grass, as if left by unseen hands. Whether these are offerings or warnings, no one dares to move them. The strangest thing is what the lantern does to shadows. Stand near it, and you'll notice your shadow doesn't fall as it should. Sometimes it stretches too far. Sometimes it bends in directions the light cannot reach. And on rare nights when the moon is thin and the air is still, some say the shadows move even when you do not. No one has discovered its origin. No inscription marks its base. No story explains who forged it. It is simply there, eternal, untamed, unyielding. And maybe that's why people keep coming back to see it, drawn like moths to something that is not fire, but feels just as dangerous. They say if you watch the lantern long enough, you'll notice something inside the glass, not a flame, not smoke, but shapes like figures walking across a horizon you cannot see, their movements slow and deliberate, as if they are watching you in return. If you ever find the lantern, you might feel the urge to reach for it, to test its warmth, to see if it's real. but those who know the stories will tell you not to. Some things are meant to stay where they are, some lights are not meant for human hands. The mirror that shows a world without you. There is a mirror hidden in the ruins of a house that no one remembers building, a place where vines crawl over the windows and the doors hang loose on rusted hinges. Inside, where dust gathers thick as ash and the air smells of rain-soaked wood, stands a tall mirror framed in blackened iron. It doesn't shine like a normal mirror. Its surface is darker, softer, like still water caught just before twilight. Those who've dared to look into it say they never see themselves staring back, not fully. They see the room behind them, the cracked walls, the broken floorboards, but where they should be, there's nothing, no reflection, just an empty world, as if they've been erased. Some say it feels like the mirror is showing a place where you don't exist, a world that continues perfectly well without you. The first story about the mirror comes from a woman who stumbled upon the house while following a lost dog into the woods. She swore that when she peered into the glass, she saw the room behind her, but brighter, newer, as though the house had never decayed. There were voices too, soft whispers she couldn't quite hear, though she felt they were speaking her name. When she stepped away, the voices stopped. Others have seen stranger things. A man once claimed that when he looked into the mirror, the world on the other side began to change. The sky turned the color of ash, and the walls of the house shifted and grew smooth, as if the mirror was rewriting reality. He swore he saw someone walking through that other world, someone wearing his clothes, someone with his face, but the figure never looked at him. It was as if that version of him lived there, unaware he existed at all. The surface of the mirror feels colder than ice. Even in summer, it bites at the skin like winter steel. Some say if you press your hand to the glass long enough, the world in the reflection will ripple, like a pond disturbed by a stone. No one knows what happens if you keep pressing. No one has stayed long enough to find out. The villagers nearby warn children never to go near the house. They tell a story of a boy who once stepped too close, gazed into the mirror for too long, and vanished. They found his shoes by the door, but he was gone, as though he had slipped into the world the mirror showed and couldn't find his way back. Travelers who have spent time there speak of feeling watched, not by someone in the house but by the reflection itself, as though something on the other side of the mirror is aware of you, studying you, deciding if you belong there. At night the mirror glows faintly, not like light, but like the pale shimmer of moonlit water. It draws the eye, almost hypnotic, and the longer you look, the more you feel the world around you start to fade, as if the mirror is the real world and everything else is just the reflection. Some say the mirror is a remnant of something ancient, a boundary between worlds that was never meant to be found. Others whisper, it's not a mirror at all, but a window, and what you see on the other side isn't a reflection, but something waiting, something patient. If you ever find it, you might feel the urge to test it, to raise your hand and see what happens when your fingers press against that impossible surface. But those who've seen it will tell you this, whatever world is on the other side of that mirror, it's not empty. It's just waiting for you to step in. The field where rain falls upwards. There is a field far from any road, hidden between rolling hills and ancient trees, where the rain does not behave as it should. When storms gather and the sky turns heavy with clouds, the rest of the world feels the downpour as expected, raindrops tumbling from the heavens, soaking the earth. But in this forgotten field, something stranger happens. Here, the rain does not fall. It rises. The first people to speak of the field were farmers from nearby villages. They said that on certain nights when the moon hung pale and low, they would see mist lifting like smoke from the grass, but not settling back down. Instead, the droplets would shimmer in the dark, drawn upward into the sky, as though gravity itself had been reversed. Some swore the rain would linger there, suspended like stars caught in a web of invisible strings, before vanishing into the clouds above. At first, no one believed them. Rain falling upward. It sounded like a traveler's tale, something told around fires to pass long winter nights. But curiosity has a way of pulling people toward strange places. A handful of wandering scholars and weather watchers began to visit the field, waiting for storms. They found that the phenomenon didn't happen often. Days, weeks, sometimes months would pass with nothing but normal weather. But then, without warning, the air would shift. The clouds would roll in, a hush would fall, and suddenly, the first droplets would rise from the grass, as if the ground itself was exhaling the storm. The sensation of standing there during one of these events is said to be unforgettable. Witnesses describe how the world grows silent, no wind, no distant animals, nothing but the soft patter of raindrops lifting into the air like tiny silver sparks. You can hold out your hand and feel the rain brush past your fingertips, not falling from above, but gliding upward, pulled toward the grey clouds that gave it birth. It's as though the sky and earth have traded places. Scientists who have studied the area are puzzled. There are no unusual magnetic fields recorded, no odd temperatures, no strange gas emissions. Nothing explains why the rain reverses its path. One theory suggests that the field sits at a place where air currents collide in an uncommon way, forcing droplets upward with sudden invisible bursts of wind. But those who have been there insist that it isn't wind at all. The upward rain moves gently, evenly, like something deliberate is guiding it. The locals whisper other theories, less scientific, more unsettling. Some say the field is cursed, the site of an old battle where blood once soaked the ground so deeply that the earth refuses to drink water anymore. Instead it sends every drop back to the heavens, rejecting all offerings. Others speak of it as a sacred place, a thin line between this world and another, where the laws of nature bend to something older, something watching. There are strange accounts from those who've stayed too long. They say that when the rain begins to rise, a feeling creeps into your chest, as if your own body wants to follow it. A lightness, almost like being pulled upward by invisible threads. Some travelers claim they felt their breath catch, their vision blur, and for a moment they weren't sure which way was up or down. A few have whispered that, just before the rain stops, the droplets hang in the air like tiny mirrors, reflecting faces that aren't their own. One old legend says the field marks the place where the sky once touched the earth, a meeting point between realms. The upward rain is a reminder, a bridge of water trying to reconnect the two. Whether it's true or not, there's something undeniably eerie about watching rain defy the world's oldest rule. If you ever find yourself there during a storm, you may feel compelled to step into the middle of the field, to tilt your head back and watch the droplets rise past your cheeks and lashes. You might feel as though the world has turned inside out, that you are standing not on solid ground but on the underside of the sky. And if you're quiet enough, some say you can hear something in the rising rain, not just the sound of water, but a faint humming, like distant voices carried upward with every drop. No one knows what happens if you stay in the field for too long when the rain is lifting. Most people leave, unsettled but awed, long before the last droplet vanishes into the clouds. But there are old half-whispered tales of travelers who didn't return, as if they followed the rain too far, drawn into the sky, until they were gone. The house that breathes when no one is home. There is a house on the edge of an abandoned road. Its roof slanted like a tired sigh, its windows dark and hollow, as if it has been waiting too long for someone to return. The locals avoid it, not because of any violent history or tales of ghosts, but because they say it does something no house should do. It breathes. From the outside, it looks like any other forgotten home. Weather-worn boards curl away from the walls, and ivy crawls up its sides like green veins. The paint, once white, is now grey and peeling, and the front steps sag under their own weight. There is nothing about it that would seem remarkable, until you get close enough to listen. They say that if you stand quietly by the door, you can hear it. A slow, measured rhythm, like the inhale and exhale of lungs. Sometimes the sound is soft, like old wood creaking, and you might mistake it for the wind. But when you step closer, the air around the house feels wrong. The pressure shifts, like a room just before a storm. And if you press your hand against the wall, some claim you can feel it, the subtle, almost imperceptible rise and fall, as though the house itself is alive. The first stories about the breathing house came from travelers passing through late at night. They spoke of hearing a deep sigh as they walked past, a hollow sound that seemed to echo through the empty windows. Some said they saw the curtains inside stir, not like a draft had caught them, but like someone or something was moving inside, even though the doors were locked and no one lived there. A few brave souls have tried to spend the night inside. Most never lasted until morning. They described the sensation as unbearable, like being trapped in a giant set of lungs. The walls seemed to shift, expanding and contracting with the rhythm of a giant sleeper. The floorboards groan in patterns, as if the house is adjusting its weight. Some claim the air grows heavy with each inhale, almost pulling at them, as if the house is trying to take their breath for itself. No one knows who built it. There are no records of its first owners, no blueprints or deeds that explain its existence. Old newspapers found in the attic suggest someone lived there in the late 1800s, a family of 4, but there are no graves or descendants. The house just stayed. When the family left, the house didn't fall silent. If anything, the breathing became louder, as though it missed them. There are theories, of course. Some say the house was built on strange land, where the earth itself is restless. Others think the materials, wood from old trees, stones from forgotten ruins, carry something alive within them, memories that refuse to die. A few whisper that the house is hungry, that its breathing is not the sound of life, but of something waiting to be fed. One unsettling story tells of a man who dared to sleep in the upstairs bedroom. In the middle of the night, he woke to find the walls moving, actually moving, closing in, and then pulling away, like the slow, deep rhythm of an animal's chest. He swore that when he put his ear to the wall, he didn't just hear breathing, he heard a heartbeat. Even now, if you pass the house on a quiet evening, you might feel it watching you. Its dark windows seem to follow your steps. Some say the house breathes heavier when someone lingers too close, as though it can sense the warmth of a living body. It's hard to know what to believe, but the locals warn never go inside when the house is awake. There have been stories of people entering and coming back with strange dreams, as though they'd been swallowed and let go. They talk about a faint humming in the walls, like the whisper of something that lives between the beams and nails. Sometimes, late at night, the neighbors claim they see a faint mist rising from the house, almost like breath in cold air. It curls out from the cracks in the windows, ghostly and pale, and on the rare nights when the wind dies and the world goes quiet, they say you can hear it all the way down the road, a slow, deep sigh, as if the house is dreaming. The bridge that waits for no travelers. There is a bridge in the middle of nowhere, stretching across a river that no map shows, built with stones so dark and smooth, they almost look polished by hands that have long vanished. No road leads to it, no village stands nearby, and yet, there it is, silent, patient, as if waiting for someone who will never arrive. The bridge has no name, it is not part of any recorded history, and there are no signs to guide you there. You find it by accident, if at all, perhaps while wandering through the wild lands where the grass grows too tall and the trees lean, as if whispering secrets. The first sight of it is unsettling because it feels deliberate. It's not broken, not overgrown, not forgotten the way ruins usually are. It feels as though it's simply waiting, like a stage set for a story that hasn't yet begun. Travelers who've stumbled upon it say the air grows strangely still when they approach, birds fall quiet, and the river beneath seems to flow without sound, as if muted by the bridge's presence. Some even claim the water looks darker there, almost black, reflecting not the sky, but some deep hidden place beneath the surface. Those who dare to step onto the bridge tell of a strange sensation, like time itself slows down. The world feels heavier, quieter, as if the bridge pulls you into its own rhythm. The stones underfoot are cold, unnaturally cold, even on the warmest days. And if you stop in the middle and look down, you might notice that the water isn't moving the way it should. Some say it swirls against the current, others say it doesn't move at all, as though frozen in place while the bridge breathes in silence. No one knows who built it or why. There are no carvings, no signs of construction, not even tool marks on the stones. The arches are too perfect, the placement too exact, as though the bridge was not built but grown. A few geologists have studied its structure and claim the stone doesn't match the surrounding land. It's not from any quarry in the region. It's as if it was brought here from somewhere else, some unknown place far older than the rivers and hills around it. The strangest thing is what happens when you linger too long. People say the bridge does not like to be crossed slowly. If you stand there, lost in thought, you might feel a vibration under your feet, a deep subtle hum, like the bridge is growing impatient. Some travelers have claimed that, as they hesitated, a sudden gust of wind swept across the span, almost pushing them forward, urging them to move. Others have felt the opposite, an invisible pull backward, as though the bridge itself wanted them gone. Local folklore suggests the bridge is not meant for the living. They tell old stories of shadowy figures crossing it in the dead of night, figures that vanish halfway across, dissolving into the mist. One tale says the bridge appears only for those who are lost, not just in the wilderness, but lost in life, and that if you cross it without knowing where you truly want to go, you won't come back the same. There is a story of a man who vanished on the bridge many years ago. He was a wanderer, a quiet man with no family, and nowhere to go. One night, he was seen heading toward the bridge with a lantern in hand. A storm rolled in, and the next morning, the lantern was found on the far side of the bridge, still burning faintly, but the man was gone. Some say he crossed into another place, a place the bridge connects to when no one is watching. Even now, on certain nights when the fog is thick, people claim they see a faint glow on the bridge, as if a lantern is swinging slowly from side to side. The river below reflects nothing, as if the bridge is hovering over a void rather than water. Those who dare to get closer say they hear something faint, an echoing footstep, a creak of weight on stone, though no one is there. And yet, the bridge waits. It doesn't crumble or rot, as though time has no claim on it. You get the feeling that it has been waiting for centuries, waiting for someone who will understand what it's for. Maybe it's not a bridge in the way we think of bridges. Maybe it doesn't just cross from one side of the river to the other. Maybe it crosses between moments, between lives, between the worlds of the living and the dead. If you ever find it, and you feel the weight of its silence pressing on you, there's only one piece of advice the locals give. Don't stop, don't look back. Cross it in one breath, and don't let it know your name. The cave where echoes speak in forgotten tongues. There are caves scattered across the world, each with their own mysteries, silent chambers where time hangs heavy, where dripping water is the only sound. But then there is this cave, hidden deep within a craggy mountain range, where the echoes themselves are said to have a voice that does not belong to anyone living. The entrance is narrow, nearly invisible, unless you know exactly where to look. It hides beneath overgrown vines and jagged stone, like the mountain itself is trying to keep it secret. Those who have ventured inside say the air feels wrong from the first step, too still, too heavy, as though the cave is holding its breath. Even the faintest whisper doesn't just bounce back as an echo, it returns twisted, altered, as if someone or something inside the dark corridors is repeating your words in a language you don't know. Locals have a name for the place. They call it the Mouth of the Old Ones. It is said that long ago, a forgotten tribe used the cave for rituals, chants and songs that were never written down, words meant only for the spirits. Some believe those words are still trapped in the stone, waiting, replaying themselves in fragments whenever a sound is made. Others insist it's not an echo at all, but voices answering, imitating, trying to speak. The first recorded account of this strange phenomenon dates back to the 1800s. A group of explorers entered the cave, mapping its narrow tunnels by torchlight. One man, separated from the group, claimed he heard someone whisper his name, not in English, not even in any language he knew, but with a tone and rhythm that made his blood run cold. When he called back, the cave didn't just echo his voice, it spoke over him, a chorus of whispers rising from the walls, as though the cave itself was alive. He stumbled out, pale and shaking, and refused to enter again. Modern researchers have tried to study the phenomenon with sound equipment. Microphones left inside the cave picked up faint voices, low, muttering tones that no one could quite place. Linguists who listened to the recordings said some sounds resembled ancient dialects from the region, but mixed with syllables that didn't match any known human language. It's as if the cave remembers words from before history began. The deeper you go, the stranger it becomes. The walls start to change, shifting from rough stone to surfaces worn unnaturally smooth, as if polished by countless hands, or something else entirely. There are faint carvings here and there, spirals and symbols that don't resemble anything archaeologists recognize. Some visitors have reported feeling light vibrations in the stone when they press their palms against it, as though something beneath the surface is moving, faint but alive. One unsettling story comes from a local shepherd who took shelter in the cave during a storm. He said that as night fell, the echoes started to form full sentences he couldn't understand, but that seemed to be directed at him. When he tried to leave, the cave answered his footsteps with sounds of more footsteps following close behind. He ran out into the rain, terrified, and claimed he could still hear the voices behind him, calling to him through the storm. The strangest part is that no one who enters the cave comes back with the same story. Some hear whispers, some hear singing, soft, mournful chants that seem to rise and fall like breath. A few claim to have heard laughter, distant and hollow, echoing from the darkness. And a handful of people have reported something far worse. The echoes don't just repeat what you say, they answer with your voice, saying words you never spoke. No one stays in the cave for long. Even scientists, with all their instruments and explanations, admit that there is something unsettling about the place. Some blame strange acoustics, the way sound bends in the twisting tunnels. Others think there's a deeper reason, a presence in the cave that remembers every sound ever made there, and tries to mimic life. But the locals believe something else. They say the cave is alive, not just with sound but with memory. They warn that if you speak your name inside, the cave will never forget it. It will call it back to you years later, in dreams or in the silence when you're alone. A few even believe that if you stay too long, the echoes will learn your voice so well that they'll keep it, leaving you voiceless when you try to speak. Those who've been brave, or foolish, enough to venture to the deepest chamber say there's a place where the echo stops entirely. No sound returns, no whisper comes back. It's as if the cave is listening, waiting, and when they finally leave, some swear they hear a faint voice, far in the distance, whispering in a language they almost understand. A voice that isn't their own. The sky that breaks without a sound. There are storms we can see coming, dark clouds gathering on the horizon, winds that howl warnings long before the first drop of rain. But then there is this. A strange phenomenon whispered about by those who have seen it, described not as a storm but as a tearing, the sky itself, breaking. And when it happens, there is no thunder, no roar of wind, just silence, so deep it presses against your chest like weight. The first known accounts came from shepherds in high mountain valleys. They spoke of clear, still afternoons when, without warning, the heavens above them cracked like shattered glass. No sound, no lightning, just a sudden fracture, like a wound opening across the firmament. The clouds would split and shimmer, bending light in ways that looked wrong, like heat mirages but colder, sharper, as though the world itself was trying to remember how to hold itself together. It doesn't last long. A few minutes, maybe less, and then the sky smooths over, pale and empty, as if nothing had happened at all. And yet the people who have seen it swear they are never the same afterward. They speak of an echoing silence that lingers in their ears, of dreams filled with colors that don't exist, and of an odd sensation that time itself skips a breath during those moments, like the universe holds still. One traveler described the experience as standing under a broken mirror that somehow reflected a sky you couldn't recognize. He claimed he saw shapes beyond the fracture, structures or outlines too vast to comprehend, like shadows of something on the other side of our world. When he reached for his camera, the device froze, lens fogging, as if it had been dragged through a cold, wet mist. The photo he took showed only a pale smear of light, nothing of what he claimed to have seen. Scientists, of course, have dismissed the phenomenon as atmospheric illusions, the result of ice crystals or rare reflections of sunlight. But that doesn't explain the silence. Even during the most intense mirages or halos, sound behaves normally. Here, sound itself vanishes. No birds, no insects, not even the hum of wind. Everything stops. Those who've stood beneath the broken sky describe it as the kind of silence you'd expect at the bottom of an ocean trench, crushing and heavy. In one remote desert region, researchers studying unusual weather patterns recorded seismic-like tremors in the atmosphere during one of these silent breaks. It was as if something above the clouds, not within them, but beyond, shifted. A kind of movement not caused by wind or temperature, but something stranger, heavier, as if the very fabric of the sky was under strain. Then there are the stories whispered, always second-hand, of people who've stood too long beneath the fracture. One hiker, last seen near a jagged peak, vanished after sending a final radio message. His last words were unsettling. "The sky is opening. I can see through it. It's not supposed to be like this." Search teams found no trace of him, only his radio, lying on the ground, silent but warm, as though it had been recently used. Local legends try to make sense of it. Some say the sky is a shield, a thin barrier between our world and another. When it breaks, we glimpse what lies beyond, a place not meant for human eyes. Others believe these fractures are warnings, signs that the earth remembers things we've forgotten, cracks in the story of our existence that briefly reveal truths too vast to understand. But the most chilling accounts come from those who claim that when the sky breaks, it is not empty beyond. Some say they have seen movement, a slow, deliberate shifting of shapes in the fracture, like enormous shadows passing behind a curtain. Not birds, not clouds. Something else, something that doesn't make sound when it moves. If you ever find yourself in such a moment, standing beneath a silent sky that looks torn at the edges, people say you should not look up for too long. There is a pull to it, like staring over the edge of a high cliff. The longer you look, the more you feel as though the sky is looking back. And when the silence lifts and the world returns, you will always wonder, did you see the sky break, or did you see something waiting for it to happen again? The book that writes its own pages at midnight. There is an old library, the kind that smells faintly of dust and forgotten ink, where a single book is said to rest on a shelf no one remembers placing it on. Its cover is plain, unmarked, neither title nor author. Its pages, when first found, were blank. But every night, as the clock drifts past midnight, the book is said to write its own words. The stories about this book began quietly, like rumors passed between tired librarians and night watchmen. A guard working the midnight shift once swore he heard the faint scratching of a pen in the empty library halls. When he followed the sound, he found nothing but the strange book lying open, ink still wet on a freshly written page. The words were elegant but unnerving, phrases describing events that hadn't happened yet, or scenes that seemed to echo the reader's own hidden fears. No one knows when the book first appeared. Some say it was left behind by a traveler, a scholar who vanished without a trace. Others claim it has always been there, buried beneath piles of forgotten volumes, waiting to be discovered. But what makes it unsettling is not just that the book writes itself, it's what it chooses to write. The words are never random. Readers have reported that the book seems to know them, to reach into their minds and pull out the things they've never spoken aloud. One woman claimed the book began describing the dream she had the night before, in perfect detail. Another man said he saw his own death written in its pages, a simple sentence, but one that came true only weeks later. The library staff tried locking it away, but no matter where they put it, the book always reappeared on the same shelf, open to a new page. Some even burned it once, thinking to end its strange influence. Yet the next night, there it was again, unmarked, waiting. Scholars who studied the book found no ink, no visible pen or writing tool, only words that seemed to rise out of the paper itself, as though the pages were bleeding memories. When the book writes, the sound is unmistakable, soft scratching, like quills moving across parchment, though no one is there to hold them. There are stories of people taking the book home, believing they could use it to learn secrets or gain power. Those stories do not end well. The book begins by writing harmless details, things about the weather or quiet observations, but as the nights pass, the writing turns personal. It begins to describe what the reader is doing at that very moment. It warns them of visitors who are not welcome. And then it tells them things they don't want to know, truths about the people they love, or secrets they've tried to bury. Some people claim they couldn't stop reading, that the book's pages drew them in until they could no longer sleep. Perhaps the strangest tale is that of a man who tried to resist the book, refusing to open it even as midnight approached. But when the clock struck 12, the book began to write by itself, the scratching sound filling the room like a whisper. When he finally looked, the page simply said, "You will look, you always look." There is one rule, the locals say: if you ever find yourself face to face with the book, never read the last page. For the last page, they believe, is where the book writes the final story, yours. No one has ever lived to tell what they saw written there. And yet, night after night, the book continues. As the world sleeps, it writes. Perhaps it writes for no one. Perhaps it writes for everyone, recording the things we've all forgotten. Or perhaps when the clock strikes midnight, the book isn't writing on its own at all. Maybe something else is writing through it, something that's been waiting for centuries, telling stories we were never meant to read. The world is filled with secrets still buried beneath our feet, stories waiting to be told, questions we may never answer. Which of these discoveries left you wondering the most? If you enjoyed this journey into the unknown, make sure to hit subscribe and give this video a like. It really helps us bring you more untold mysteries. And before you go, tell me in the comments where you're watching from and what time it is right now. Until next time, keep your curiosity alive. Some truths are closer than we think,